I did.
Oh, okay.
We're about to go. Intro's coming. All right, ready? Today's guest is a very interesting cat. Welcome to the Matt Belair podcast. The intro is already interesting because we were chatting before. But the guest today has done a lot of interesting things. We're having an interesting conversation before we started. He was a farm boy. He played poker for a few years, learned mathematics, logistics, numbers. He told me he's met 40 to 50,000 people and asked them what really matters to them, which I'm curious to find out what it was. He is currently disrupting the solar industry as a co-founder of Ovanova, and he has spent the last couple years trying to figure out life, what humans are doing, what the heck he is doing, and gave him time to really think and analyze things in a very deep way. Very excited to have a nice, deep conversation with Lester Crafton.
My heart feels so warm and fuzzy on the inside. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Matt.
Yeah, I love that. It's like just mess up right from the beginning. I was like, yeah, sometimes I mess up the intro. I'm like, oh, okay, there we go. We're off to the races. It's already. We're keeping it real, man.
Good.
Yeah, when we had, I really enjoyed learning about you and what you're doing, and then just even the 15 minutes we had before we pushed play here. You just kept going down and down and down, like, whoa, like there's a lot of stuff here. Very interesting cat. You've done a lot of interesting things. So we're probably going to talk today a little bit about solar energy and energy, probably a little bit about what's important in life, some of your amazing stories, where people are at. Maybe we get to outer space, who even knows? But just to give the audience a little bit of an idea of who you are, and some of the really interesting experiences you've had, maybe you can kind of share a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today. So I know you have a lot of stories, but we'll start with like a little bit of a background, and we'll go into different things.
Absolutely, brother. Here's the most basic version of the story is I grew up on a farm in West Tennessee, in the middle of nowhere. Basically being a child laborer. I've worked since I was 7 or 8 years old on equipment that if I told you the names of it, you wouldn't even know what the heck it means. From discs to do-alls, cotton pickers, combines, you name it. And one of the cool things about growing up on a farm, especially an old school, small farm, is that when things break, you learn that you keep working until you fix it. So growing up in a place where it just wasn't an option to not do the work, it just wasn't an option to not fix what it was broken, and to grow up in a small community where I think a lot of times people in cities are really hard towards people, but are really soft towards problems because it's easy to go fix a problem with money because there's so many people. Growing up in the country, you get really hard towards problems because you have to find creative solutions to problems. But you get really soft towards people because you need your neighbors to take care of you. So I was lucky, to grow up in a place where I could go across the road, knock on a door at my neighbor/cousin's house and ask for some sugar or some flour that my mom or dad needed to cook. Went from there to the university. I did well in high school, somehow managed to get into the University of North Carolina. I'm a Tar Heel. I wasted 4.5 years studying business there, and then social life, and that was a whole lot of fun. But probably the most significant part of my college experience was getting invited to do this really weird sales and leadership program. It's this 150-year-old company that has this tradition that's been passed down like orally from generation to generation. They started out selling Bibles, and then they sold educational books, and now it's educational stuff and websites and character development, and they've turned into a multinational corporation. But to give you sort of an idea of the mindset, there are 2 people on President Trump's cabinet that have that same background as me. So that is where I come from. That led to a bizarre journey where I had a chance to meet and lead about 1,500 people through a very trying experience where we were out knocking on doors, getting rejected thousands of times by strangers while we were just trying to help their kids with homework. And through an experience of leading an organization and believing in the goodness of people, to watch an 18-year-old kid with a week's worth of training and just belief in herself take a bag full of books, go to some place they'd never been, knock on doors, find a place to live the day that they got there by knocking on doors, and then go out with a couple of roommates and motivate themselves to go work 80 hours a week and overcome rejection. with the purpose of being in service to others, that was a really cool experience. That gave me a chance to meet thousands and thousands of people and to vicariously meet millions of others through the experiences of the people that I led, through what the numbers told me about the day. And then a girl decided that she wanted to marry me. So that was a really fun 7 years. Part of the 7 years was in New York City because she was an actor and, you know, amazing woman. And New York allowed me to think bigger. When I would fly back into New York every weekend after flying out to work to be on college campuses, and how lucky am I to have spent from 1996 to 2014 on college campuses. So I never got to see the people slowly die and get trapped, you know, in those careers where things that just don't make sense start to seem like they make sense because we start to be afraid and we die. I got to see the early stages of that, but I was there for the transition period. So the concept of transitions is embedded in my DNA. The belief that if we persist and we look to solve problems, that even with minimal training, by working together and loving each other and believing in the best in people, regardless of how we've been treated, that can solve problems. And eventually learning to see the power of networks and just what it means to believe. But New York helped me learn to think bigger, because when I'm flying in and seeing the buildings, I just thought, here is this giant thing that used to be an idea in someone's mind. It was just an idea. But then they shared it with people, and some other people were like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then they've like, I've got a buddy that can do that. I've got a buddy that can do that. I've got a buddy that can do that. And before you know it, it's like, what the hell? Well, that's an Empire State Building. Before there were computers, we built that. Like, what can we do as humans? Which led me to start thinking about how far we've come since we were cavemen. And maybe we'll get into some of that earlier. But in 2014, I had a chance to join the solar industry. I felt like it was a calling. And at the time, they wanted door-to-door salespeople and people with that experience, as crazy as that sounds. And then we came out to California, and I have never seen more resistance towards anything in my entire life. We had like the sales team 6, beautiful, college-educated, articulate, high integrity, awesome communicating people, and due mainly to my leadership, because I wasn't willing to lead this endeavor once I realized what the heck we were up to, we failed miserably. But I didn't give up on solar. What I gave up on is that it made sense to go have human beings who aren't voluntarily willing to go spread a message about something that's as beautiful as solar energy. What became apparent to us in time is that what's really holding solar back, in our opinion, is the way it's being presented to the public. Because ultimately, the world that solar energy creates is a world of absolute abundance. It's a world of sharing. It's a world of giving. It's a world of creativity. It's a post-should, post-work world. Like, that's long-term, but we can say that on this podcast because you talk about wild things that are out there. So trying to do solar energy in a way that companies that were actually all based on Standard Oil, basically every company today's blueprint comes from an oil company and from the military. And so something that's, abundant and free and connected, that business model of non-transparency for something that shines light on the world just didn't seem to fit. So we got lucky. We talked to some people. We found a new way to go about being a catalyst for the solar revolution. Got lucky to stumble into the right places and the right people and the right influences at the right time, from a woman who helped us out a couple of years ago with some of the copy for what we were doing, whose first boyfriend was Al Gore, to stumbling upon the founder of the Green Party, one of the co-founders of the Green Party, Annie Goki, out in Santa Monica at Earthrights. And she gave us some crucial feedback to help us understand where our own blocks were about the model that we created and what we could do to really make it for the community all the way, all the communities. We met, like, one of the guys that advised us early, his dad, in March with Dr. King and the civil rights stuff. There's a lady whose family was affected by the nuclear reactor disaster over in Japan, who moved her daughters over to America. When she found out her kids were eating radioactive food, she started sending her kids their own food to school, and people called her a monster parent. When she wouldn't let them go on field trips to the affected area, they called her a monster parent. So with just 2 bags and 2 daughters, she flew over to San Diego and said, I never once thought about where energy comes from in my entire life until I started thinking about whether or not my grandkids would be born with extra fingers or toes. And when I realized that there's an impact, a massive impact on where our energy comes from, I wanted to be involved. And she's one of the people who's working with us. Is the only job we have at our company is called a connector. And it's just people who spread the word to organizations that we exist, and then we share what comes in, from that. So in short, Farm Boy met a lot of people, did the best I could to motivate, train, inspire people to do their best in the service of others. I got lucky to get called into solar through a random occurrence, failed miserably, went through a couple of more experiences, and then found a way possibly to do something that we think is great for the world by giving away billions of dollars to help people learn about solar.
Right. Amazing. Yeah, it's an interesting, well, you have an interesting background. Solar is obviously important. Getting off oil is obviously important. Like, solar energy is pretty much unlimited. I heard in Canada, I don't know, this is kind of like a side note, but we have these wind farms that are coming. So I think we're talking about energy, and there's like tidal energy. We could start using solar energy, wind energy. And so what's happening, I think, on the big scale is that, in Canada, and I don't know if this is true 100%, but I've heard it a couple of times, that they're taking the excess wind energy they're creating and they're putting it into the ground just because, they don't want to give it away for free. And so they're electrocuting cows. So farmers are getting pissed off because their cows are getting electrocuted because they're redirecting it into the ground because they all have this abundance of energy. So, yeah, which is super messed up. So I guess because we can go a lot of different ways with this, I think, me being in the festival world and you being obviously of service to other things, a lot of us are talking about how to build these new communities, how to build like a new world, a new society, a new way of living. And first we need to empower ourselves. And one of the big things is energy.
Right.
So how do we take, people, when you go, and I learned when I was looking at houses and land, they make it mandatory that you have to have an energy outlet. And like, I could buy land in Canada, but they're like, no, you have to have an energy outlet. I'm like, why do I have to do that? This is my land. I could get solar or something and you can go F yourself because this is mine. So we have these really messed up systems in place right now. I guess my question is, with solar or energy in general, how do you see energy in the world, like its importance, why we should move to solar, why solar is a good option? Are there any other options that you would support and advocate for? Just the general understanding of energy on the planet.
Well, thanks for asking. I think that since you have a festival crowd, let's talk about energy from a slightly different perspective and then make it very literal to answer that question, because a lot of times I come across as metaphorical and abstract when really I'm just so literal. I'm talking about things that are right in front of your face. Did you ever hear the story about the old fish and the two young fish? And the old fish swims by the two young fish and looks over and goes, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And then one fish looks at the other fish after the old fish swims off and he says, "What's water?" Because when something surrounds us so much, like water to a fish, it becomes invisible to us, and it takes a while to wake up to why it's important. So let's start with the abstract thing about energy, and then let's get to the very literal part. The abstract thing is this. This isn't some hoodoo, voodoo, weird stuff. Like if you look at what we call our bodies, it's made up of a bunch of molecules, which are made up of a bunch of atoms, which are made of electrons, protons, neutrinos, and you keep going further and further back until you realize it's essentially waves. Even if they're particles, they behave like waves. So I am nothingness in waves, maybe, to the best of what we understand. Like I am nothingness in waves. Between me and you right now, it looks like a blank space, but it's air, which are molecules, which reduce to nothingness and waves. And then you are nothingness and waves. So really, we're just kind of like potatoes in an energy soup. Like what we are never changes, it just rearranges. We were nothingness and waves arranged as God knows what before we manifested in the form in which we currently find ourselves. And after our body goes back into the ground or is burned up, it will go and become a tree or something else. And that's not any grand idea. It's just an interesting way of looking at it, because your voice is a wave. Your mind waves are a wave. So to think that your waves don't have an effect on the soup is to think that the potato has no impact on the taste of the energy soup. We're all in it together. There's no separateness. And coming from that perspective, it allows us to get to the really literal stuff. Like if I am you, or we are the same substance swimming in the same substance, whatever the heck that means, then you realize that like I said, for the last 2 years, I've said the same prayer, thank you for my life. Give me the wisdom to see your path and the courage to take it. Whoever I'm praying to, that's up for you to decide. I don't know, but I'm sending waves into the universe. And what I've come to believe is that wisdom is recognizing that we're safe. And if you are a bunch of nothingness and waves, and I'm a bunch of nothingness and waves, and there's really nothing to be afraid of, and we can start thinking of solutions. Instead of here's a person that's competing with me to take something that I need to survive and be enough, it's just here's a bunch of waves that look like what I call a human. I wonder how we can work together to create some beautiful solutions so we can play. Hey guys, that's some roommates walking. I'm on a podcast right now. Can you guys keep it down for a second? Thank you. All right. The second thing I mean by energy when it comes to literal stuff, Matt, is this. Look around your room right now. Just look around at every single object in the room. And what you'll notice is that there might be several things they have in common, but there's one thing, I bet anything they all have in common, is they would not be in your room or in your existence right now without oil. Whether that was somebody driving to work at a factory to make it, whether that was an 18-wheeler driver taking it to a warehouse, or you driving to IKEA or wherever. Even if you buy secondhand recycled stuff, it still took a while to get there. And even if you took 5 people and walked across the city, then you did that with energy that came from food that was produced on a farm, like where I grew up, with a giant tractor that runs on oil, that was then shipped to the grocery store that runs on oil. And at the grocery store and in your home, there's electricity. And we very rarely think about our electricity, but we talk about fossil fuels and that confuses it. It's just oil. Because how do coal miners get to work in the morning? They drive trucks. Those run on oil. The big machines that take the coal from the mountains, that runs on oil. It puts it on a train that runs on oil. It goes down the tracks to a power plant with a big machine that runs on oil. And then it puts the coal into a burner and it makes some steam. I like to use the term old-fashioned energy, not to be disparaging, but creating steam that like spins crap. I mean, that's like something that I think of like the 1700s and some weird guy with some British name that thought it up, or something. It's like, cool, steam energy, humans, yeah, like we're so smart and creative. We're still figuring out better ways to make fire. And so when you start to notice that electric plant then spins some stuff and makes some electrons, and this answers the question also about different forms of energy, is that those electrons or electron fields then go down waves, or go down wires, sorry. They go down wires to different breakers and different substations and different this and different that. Or they come from some pipeline that we know the problems with pipelines from, Standing Rock and different places. But those all require human beings to go to work to maintain. And what's invisible to us, just like, well, I'm not going to go there right now, but what's invisible to us is the overwhelming amount of human effort it takes every day to turn the light bulb on or to power our bodies. And when you can reduce things all the way down to energy and technology, things start to make a lot more sense. When you understand the only type of technology that used to exist was the technology we call a body, and the only energy that used to exist was the biological kind that fed that technology, then you start to understand why we fought over lands for millennia, because on these lands you could grow energy. And the laws back then protected your land and protected your property, because without that, you couldn't produce energy to survive. And that was the story of 200,000 years of human civilization before we accessed oil about a century ago. And then all of a sudden, I like to say, here's a great metaphor, and then we can move on to the next question. So what energy allows us to do is it allows us to be healthy, gives us the food, and the sanitation and all the things we need to be healthy. And when we're healthy, we like to connect. And we can do that with different devices. There are devices like the ones we're using right now to be able to speak telepathically, because I could not speak loudly enough for you to hear me. And you couldn't ask me questions without these superpowers called computers and cell phones. Like we literally as humans have superpowers, but it's just like, ho hum. This is just how it is, right? We can do nearly every human now with access to energy and technology can speak to everybody else in the world if they have a message that can be shared and is worth sharing by other people. So when I see energy, I see a very real, literal need that if our devices, it's like vampires. Like vampires suck the blood from humans and it gives them superpowers. They can go fast, they're super strong. Sometimes they live a long time and they can fly sometimes. We drink the blood from the earth, we call that oil, and it gives us superpowers. We can go fast in our cars, we can go strong with our bulldozers, we live longer than we did by a lot, and we can sometimes fly. We have superpowers. But we don't like living this vampiric existence. It's why people like you and these communities are popping up to be like, it doesn't have to be like this. There has to be another way. It does not feel right because it conflicts with what we experience as a child, which is we can crap ourselves 5 times a day, scream in the middle of the night, and still be loved unconditionally. We can say, word 10 million times until it becomes water, and nobody tries to convince us that we're not a good speaker because we don't say it right the first time. We learn red marks in schools. We learn that we're not competent. We learn we're not capable. And even in metaphors, there's truth, because how do you get rid of vampires? It's a question. What's one way to get rid of vampires, Matt?
Well, stab them in the heart with a
like
a pick,
a wooden stake.
Yeah,
but they're big and fast and strong and smart. So that's tough. What's another way to do it?
Sunlight.
Oh, so maybe if we want to stop living like vampires, it would make sense to open up to the concept of what we experienced as a child, which is the idea of grace. The reason that I believe the world hasn't accepted solar is because we have a hard time believing that we are worthy and deserve to receive energy from above for free, because we told ourselves a collective story for eons that in order to be productive, in order to be accepted, you had to go to work. Because as long as we lived on farms, that was true. If our work determines our ability to survive, then that makes sense. But in a world where nearly everything could be automated, and we have time, like 100 years ago, you and I would have been baling some hay to feed the horses. You know, today we're having a conversation about waves and energy, and look how far we've come this century. Like, unlike most
20 years ago.
Yeah, or even 20 years ago, or even freaking 5 years ago, we probably we wouldn't have been able to do this as well. Like, we're connected now. And so as humans, we're pretty well connected. Like in the countries that have access to oil, like as this amazing energy source, we're pretty well connected. But what happens if there's a plague? What happens if there's a zombie apocalypse? What happens if one day all the people that work on oil fields and oil mines or coal mines and work getting blown up on pipelines? What if those people one day just all decide to say, fuck it, then the lights go out and then we're screwed? And so I'm just looking at it from a how can we breathe? You know, the way we make energy now is a lot more like the 1980s fitness, go, go, go hard fitness craze. Whereas what I'm proposing and what is possible is more like yoga and meditation. The solar panels just sit on top of your house and receive energy, where if there is a creator to the simulation we call life, then it's a jokester. Because it's like, hey, you guys don't like working? Well, I'm going to put the answer right in front of your faces and make it the shiniest thing possible, where there's not a single person on earth that won't be able to see it. And if you guys ever figure out how to use this, then it's going to be all right. And you look at how much music there is about the sun, you know, and blah, 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 blah. But I digress. The point is energy is what we need to connect. Right now it comes from oil. Oil is not free. Sunlight is. The technology to create energy from oil is not free. Those are refineries and chemists and all these different people. That's not free. The technology to produce solar is not free currently. But if the technology to produce oil were free and the technology to produce solar energy were both free, then one way requires millions of people being enslaved, although we call it jobs and ignore the damage because they're paid well. Like Rick and Morty season 2, episode 6, it's like slavery with extra steps. But you have that reality versus we can just let the sunshine power our lives where nobody has to go to work. And you're thinking about, did you ever see the Hunger Games? Or
Yeah.
You know what? District 12 are the people who are the energy workers. They're coal miners, where Katniss is from. It's the people who are involved in making this ideal life in the capital, places like where we live, Los Angeles, New York, where we have time to talk about reality and create beautiful things and share things together. Because I sat down with tens of thousands of people in Ohio and Wisconsin and Michigan, and because of where I'm from, I know what those people's lives are like. And I understand why they're hurting. I understand why they'll seek any answer, no matter how ridiculous it may seem, to solve their problems. Because the connectivity that came to the cities first left them behind, and that's where the opportunity with the technology is taking the robotic jobs. The guys that I talked to who were iron miners in Negaunee, Michigan, their kids don't have the same opportunities they did. The people that worked at Longer Burger Baskets in Zanesville, Ohio, that I sat down with in 1996 and listened to them talk about why their kids' education was important. Those jobs don't exist because robots can do them. Technology can do it more efficiently, and it only takes electrons to feed it. So saying a lot of words to say this, unless we want to create a Hunger Games scenario, which it seems like we're getting pretty damn close to doing in our country, then we need to recognize that there's a huge gap between the capital and the energy workers who have been left behind in the middle of America. And the fastest way to close that gap is to access a form of energy that nobody has to work for, and then to create the machines to automate the things that really matter, like your food production. And there's lots of beautiful work being done about that, from cargo shipping containers to GPS self-driving tractors to, I see a world with solar powered drones. But the world of energy is what connects the world. It's what makes this possible. But just like water to fish, we never think about it because it is all around us every day. And if you look around and you see all the stuff in your room and you think about the number of times it was transported, you start to see what you're really paying for is energy a lot more than the thing itself. And so when we get stuck in a world where we're competing for access to oil, it's just a kind of funky world. And it's a hell of a lot better than living in a world where it makes sense to hang somebody if they steal a horse, or cut off somebody's hand if they steal a loaf of bread. We're living in a way cooler world than that. But the difference is energy. Slavery never came back. I mean, my grandparents were sharecroppers, which was basically like slavery extended and expanded to all races. And where you work and work and work and work and work and never really receive anything for the work that you put in because you don't own the land, which is really not that much different than working for a big corporation or a lot of other different things that people do. It's changed, but it's the same, the way we fight and what we fight over. And so from that experience, that sharecropper experience is just, we don't have to live like that anymore. Like, we don't have to continue to force people to do things they don't want to do just to have dollars to pay for oil whenever we could have a different source of energy. And for a while, it didn't make sense to talk about these things because it wasn't ready from the place where the world is, which is still thinking about dollars. And so where we are now with solar energy is we've crossed the point, Matt, where it now costs more to use old-fashioned energy than it does to access the power of the sun. And we just created a way to spread the word about it. So when I think about energy, that's what I think about. I think about potatoes and energy soup. I think about vampires. I think about the cost of all the stuff in the room. I think about Hunger Games. I think about there's just energy falling out of the sky for free and we know how to use it and it's less expensive. So like, come on, humans, like, we're almost home. So part of me is thinking like, what in the world, guys, wake up. But I don't think of energy in terms of a sector for the industry to a financial sector to $1 trillion financial sector. It's like It's a fucking thing that holds it all together and makes the world possible. So if that part of it's free, then what can we create? If we're not wasting hundreds of millions of human hours, the best technology, human technology, the kind of technology that can dream things up and create things. And if there's one thing we know as humans is that when we dream it up, if we really want to do it and it actually adds value to the world, we can create it. Like, this world is absolutely impossible to somebody in the 1800s. It is wildly, insanely impossible to somebody that was a cave person. Can you imagine if you and I were cavemen hanging out and I picked up a rock and it was raining and we were in a tree and I just said, Matt, dude, I just want to touch this rock. Probably some language like that, and I just want to touch this rock. And I want pathogen-free, hot food with spices that come from some other part of the world delivered to me. And what I want to have to give up to access that is 15 minutes of my time looking at a screen and moving my fingers, which would be like a data entry job and ordering something on delivery.com or Uber Eats or Grubhub or whatever. But what would you have said to me if I'd said that? You would have said, shut up, stop being stupid, get back to work. We have to go hunt some animals. We have to go find some berries. Like, we don't have time to discuss nonsense, but the nonsense is what always gets created eventually because it's what we want. And from talking to 40, 50,000 people, what I believe to be true or point towards truth about what we want in our human existence is that we want to be healthy, even if we're not willing to do the things it takes. Like, if you could take a magic pill and be healthy, everybody would be healthy. And we're getting pretty close to magic pills called gene editing and nanotechnology and some other really rad stuff. We want to be healthy, which again is technology and energy and just having enough people with enough time to come up with it. And then when we're healthy, we want to connect, whether that's transportation or computers, cell phones, whatever. We want to connect, and we want to connect doing the things we love with the people we love, where we love, when we love. Even if the people we would love to do it with is just ourselves. And what we want to do is climb to the top of the mountain by ourselves. Generally, when we're healthy and we're doing something cool, and we're doing what we love to do, it attracts great people to do it with us. Because one thing, Molly Joseph, I don't know if you know Molly, she started The Rise and she used to be a DJ. It's a conscious community here in LA. But she asked a question last year that I thought was priceless. She said, what would you love to do? Not what should you do? Because should is a violent word that comes from big people telling us what we're supposed to do in order to be loved, and accepted. That's when we're little. You should. And then we get this stupid should voice in our head. And we stop asking, what would you love to do? What would I love to do? And what I would love to do is to have conversations like this all day. What I would love to do is give away billions of dollars to people who are working on worthwhile projects when people who support them take 10 minutes to learn about solar energy. And I didn't see anywhere that it said I couldn't do that. I don't see any sign anywhere that says that you can't do what you love to do other than our self-limiting beliefs. So through a lot of experience working with a lot of humans and thinking about how can we create, if you started a utopia and you work backwards, there aren't people working in coal mines and oil fields. So if we're going to create this amazing, abundant, Burning Man type world, like Burning Man for everybody, where we can dance naked in the streets at noon or whatever the hell we want, and just absolutely spread the love to everybody, then there are still people in West Virginia in coal mines to even make that experience possible because of all the goods that were brought there. And I can't, because I've sat in those people's living rooms, because I grew up in places like that, I can't write them off as a casualty of, not doing better in school and going to college and doing whatever the hell it is people who do that do. Like, they're real people. And the one thing that will keep them from being left behind is another energy source, and that's what we're working on delivering to the world. So that's energy.
Amazing, dude. It's just like, I love just watching like the wheel go, and then it's like wrapping up, and then boop, we're scoping over here. It's almost like a flower of life pattern of information. You start, or maybe you start on the outside, and eventually the circles gravitate towards the middle. You said a lot there, and I definitely agree with a lot of it, all of it pretty much. I think for me, the challenge is really like, if we're going to get real with this shit, energy is the biggest in the world. So the people with all of the money, they control a lot of the stuff, like
Because it comes
the
from oil.
politics, like armies, like all that kind of thing. And I think that we could have had free energy. You know, I heard, you know, what would happen. I've seen those diagrams of like what would happen if we lived in a Tesla age. We took that technology and we didn't have opposing forces, negativity messing it up. Well, then I also heard only recently, what if we already had it with Pythagoras? He already sorted it out, you know, whenever the heck he was around, which I don't know if it's thousands of years, hundreds of years, I'm not sure. So I don't know that, but we've had these technologies, we've had this information. You look at Thrive there, you know, like I said, solar's not even just the only one. Like with what we can do, the power of a wave, you've got worked by 1 4-foot wave. You know how much power is coming out of the ocean. It's
That's a lot.
absurd, right? And
Yes.
that wave comes over and over and over and over and over again, and we can harness that. So I think it comes with personal education, understanding energy, how much we're putting in oil. You know, I had a good friend that worked in oil, and it's like, bro, like, I understand you got to take care of your family, but like you're contributing to the problem, you know? But you got a family and you got these things like, you know, people go in the military in the States, really high numbers because you can get paid, right?
Yeah.
So we're in this time now that I think it's really important we understand the world from a high level, from like a really big level, understanding what our enemies are, not enemies, like opposition is, and how we take responsibility for ourselves like you're doing, contributing to other people, because we're kind of, we're on the metaphysical sense, I'm in Sedona, so I'll go ham with it, because people are talking about all these concepts. But they say like the indigos, which what I see, building the new earth, and we have to crack through. Basically, you know, in football, whatever they are, the people got to crack the defense. Like that's what we got to do, so that our generation, our kids, our teenagers, our babies have something that makes more sense. Because I woke up into this, 33 years old now, being like, what the F-bomb is happening? This is all nonsense. Do none of you older people telling me what reality is see this? Like you can't see something better, but now we have information and people and things like that. So we have to rebuild it with our own personal choices and also education.
Amen.
So that being said, what I wanted to kind of touch on, because I know that we can go a lot of different ways with this energy, things like that.
Touches everything. Like there's no way we can't go with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it touches everything.
Yeah. What do you, with the, you know, when you did the 2 years of really reflecting, because you were saying, you know, do you want to talk, because you're talking a little bit about before that, who you were before, you know, huge meat eater, you know, you were in it. You had that.
I was deep in it. I was like a high priest of it, man. I taught a generation of people how to go out and be smiling killers. Like how to be of service. Yeah, we were selling kids books, so it's not like we're actual killers, you know. Like that much doesn't hurt somebody to listen to a college kid show them some kids books. But in my mind, it was this game. Like if you went back and found some old recordings I made where I'm motivating people to go work on the 4th of July because it's American and like work harder, and and I learned a lot from that experience. But this is what I eventually came to ask myself. Let's assume that I can do exactly what I want to do. Then what is it that I want to do based on my actions? And what I want is I want to be someone who can get anything and get anybody to be able to get anything. It was about getting. It was about getting fairly. It was about getting ethically. This wasn't like door-to-door sales, like go around and beg somebody to buy something because you're a starving college student. It's like, hi, my name's Lester. I was just talking to John and Cindy, and I wanted to swing by here for a minute. Like what I'm doing is showing some books that a lot of folks like John and Cindy, do you know those? Yeah, Lisa and Frank. Yeah, this is something they all signed up for, but you don't have to. It just takes a couple minutes, and I'd love to show it to you. Like, okay, cool. You sit down with them in their living rooms and you talk to them. These are real conversations happening. So I trained thousands of students how to do that. And because I loved it so much myself, because I loved the look on a kid's face when their parents believed in them enough to invest in their education. I loved when parents felt good about what they were doing. I loved the funny moments, like the real moments that happen when you don't know if the dog farted or mom farted, Her dad farted, and then you say something about it, and you just start laughing, like to see just weird things. I've seen so many weird things because I've been in so many people's homes, and I greatly value that experience. But being caught in the oil matrix, which is what I just described earlier, if all of your electricity and all of your things and all of your food depends on oil to get to you, then we're trapped in that. Like literally everything that we think is good and right and makes sense is based on how do we access oil, or how do we access oil and technology. And so my life vision was to be as good as I could possibly be at helping people get what they wanted, but I'm still thinking about getting. I'm still thinking about getting. And so let me make this shorter. When you think about it, if you were the very best getter ever, meaning that you were so good at getting stuff that there is nothing that you couldn't take from someone, and you lived under the paradigm of more for me is good, so therefore the more you can get, the better. Like there's almost this moral goodness to getting more, as long as you didn't break any laws to do it. It's like the only thing that guides your morality is what you can get away with without going to jail. But because you're so good at getting, you don't even skirt the laws. Somehow, every person, you can get what you want to. So if I believe that more for me is good, and I can get whatever I want, what would I end up taking? If I met you and I could take anything I wanted from you, and I thought more for me is good, how much would I take from you? I'd take as much as I possibly could. In fact, I'd take everything because there's nothing you could do to stop me. And then I'd take everything from everyone else. And then what I would be left with is everything and absolutely nothing. And so it's like, okay, well, if I can really see to the end of that path and that's not where I want to go, why would I continue walking down it at all? Why would I continue to use my one wild and precious life that for the most part done a really great job of looking for and believing in people and seeing the best in people and being grateful and just joyous to live in such an amazingly wild human family. We do weird things, man. It's so cool. But at the same time trying to teach people that they should go out and take from people, even if taking is called serving or taking is called some euphemism. It's still about what's the most we can take from you. There are businesses like, what price point should we have? Let's worry, like basically what you're asking is, what's the most we can take from people without them getting pissed off about it? And so like, that took 20 years of hardcore business experience to come to that realization. And I just one day said, well, I don't know if there's another way. There's a lot of really smart people who've said there is. I don't know what it's going to take to find that path. But what if we started with a concept of give first? And in my old business, I was very fortunate to have an opportunity to test that out. We had a website we could give away instead of books that we could sell. And so I thought, how cool would it be if we just gave people access to a website? Like it's not that revolutionary of an idea, except for in a company that's been around for 150 years. And I went about doing that the completely wrong way and turning 2 decades of people who felt like family against me because it seemed so egotistical and it was still about me and trying to save this company. At the end of the day, we were still trying to get people to buy something. And now I'm just very transparent about what we're trying to get people to buy. And we're trying to get people to buy the concept that it's possible to receive our energy from above for free. We're trying to show them that the technology already exists, and then the more people adopt it, the better it's going to get. It's about what can we give, which is why the mission statement of our organization, Ovanova, is to add as much value as possible to as many lives as possible. And the way we set about doing that was thinking, well, who are the organizations that are already adding value to people's lives? Burning Man groups, Sunday school groups, school groups, reading groups, fantasy football leagues, baby showers, crowdfunding, entrepreneurial ideas. We just wanted to find some way to be able to give back by giving first. Because there were already some solar companies will pay referral fees. We knew that after the fact. We knew from being deeply involved in the industry how much they were paying just to find a customer on all the advertising and sales commissions. We also knew, because of our background and all those experiences sitting in people's homes, what they were doing to create pushback needlessly, what they couldn't see because of the world they're living in. And we just tried to create something a little bit more like the sun. You know, where the sun is a special environment where two things that normally don't come together, like two hydrogen atoms, create a helium atom, and from that abundance that's shared with everybody. We just created a unique environment where nonprofits, Burning Man groups, camps, conscious communities, whatever your cause is, and the homeowners who support them can come together with the solar industry, with partners that we have found who are on the same mission of adding value, who really want to spread the word about the sun, who believe that we had trillions of dollars not spent towards energy production and we were safe. When you think about the military, if you had 100 million homes producing their own energy, where we're stay connected no matter what happens, then what are we going to fight over? Like if we were producing our own food and shipping containers in the backyard powered by the sun, and our cars were powered by the sun, and our homes were $5,000 3D printed houses that were domes that lasted 1,500 years. I mean, what the fuck are we going to fight over? So the next stage of what we're doing is working on developing, pardon my language, we're working towards communities for artists, scientists, and healers. If we can help, we can find the communities who are willing to spread the word. We make very little from what we do, and I'll be glad to share the numbers of that transparently if anybody would like to know. But essentially, if somebody goes solar, we earn $100 for creating the service. So if we help 1 million people go solar, $100 million is plenty for 5 people. And we don't want it for jets and bling and limos. We just want to create some places where we can use technology to bring people with beautiful minds and hearts together to be able to live full time and to create and to see what we can produce in the world, to see what we can bring. So I don't get to share that part of the vision very often because it's so far out there, but speaking to a community like yours, I think you get it. The abundance that we create will be used to create experimental communities to show the world what's possible when we're living in an abundant energy reality, an abundant technology connected reality, instead of this disconnected, compete with each other to survive mentality. So that's stage 2 after we help the world.
Just about when I was going to take a note, you stopped talking. I was like, what? I thought you had another few concentric circles to go.
Oh, I got a lot more to go. I'm aware that I say a lot. It sounds good to me. When I say it, it sounds like listening to somebody recite their ABCs. But I also realize that, because how we got onto that, it's talking about what I do for the last 2 years. Well, it was 5 years ago I made that decision, and I worked to eliminate the word get from my vocabulary, unless it was like I get to go do something that's fun, like it's an honor or a privilege, get. Otherwise, I started looking at where get is from, and I started to recognize it as almost always being a fear-based word. There's something I feel that I need to get in order to make me enough, whether it's enough likes on a Facebook video, or it's money from a job, or it's the symmetry of the woman's face in whom I'm interested. Once I get that, then I'll be happy, and then I'll be whatever, and that's just not the way life is. It's not the abundant path. That's the path to scarcity. That fear cuts us off from each other and causes us to miss opportunities that are right in front of our face. The only reason we were fortunate enough to come up with this is we were really thinking about, how can we spread the word about solar? Well, communities could do that. Well, how can we reward communities? Well, there's a lot of wasted money going towards stupid sales crap. And sales crap doesn't have to exist if what you're selling saves people money and saves the world. Like you said, it just requires education. It just requires people understanding, oh my gosh, you mean I could save money today by adopting solar energy? And so by learning to really start to think, I'd always been a servant. I'd always worked hard. I'd always tried to help people succeed. What shifted for me is what success means. And like you mentioned, I went from being a 300-pound, meat-eating, cowboy boot-wearing, Cadillac, high fuel consumption, flying every week, teaching people to work 100 hours a week and succeed, and that was good, dude, living in New York, to being a vegan who wears dashikis, living in Hollywood, driving a Prius that I'm inclined to get rid of until, my Tesla comes along, if then. And talking about spreading renewable energy through a gift first fundraising platform. And I know that if I can go from where I've been and recognize I was only there because I was afraid, I was only there because I wanted to be accepted, I was only there because there were things that I thought that I needed to do and ways I needed to come across, in certain ways I needed to say things so that people would hear me, believe in me, accept that what I was selling them so that I could survive. But there was never going to be enough to make me to fill up a hole that somebody else had convinced me that I should have, because I was born believing that I could do anything. I was born it never occurred to me once I wouldn't be able to learn to walk or wouldn't be able to talk. It was so, I don't remember persisting and overcoming self-doubt, even though I failed thousands of times, because that was my default programming. I had to learn from watching other people what I wasn't capable of doing. And so, why live that life? And the last 2 years have been when we came up with the concept and we tested it and we saw how quickly it could spread, we decided to take about 50 steps backwards, to take some time to get ourselves healthy, to make friends and receive feedback for what we were doing, to find ways to improve it, and for me, it involves spending every dime that I'd saved in my entire career, to be unwilling to take on investors who believe that this is about money. The only thing that this is about regarding money is money to give away to communities whenever people who support them are willing to take 10 minutes on a phone and online to learn what they can save using solar. It's about the money that people are going to save by using solar, and it's ultimately about ending the need for money because of if we're safe. I mean, again, if you have 100,000 homes producing power, what's China going to do? Come steal our people to work in their coal mines? It's no, here, we'll just make some solar for you. Leave our people here. They're having fun doing their art. They don't want to go work in coal mines. Are they going to come steal our coal? Okay, cool, take it. We don't need it. It's like somebody coming and stealing your horseshoes. Cool, you got some leftover horseshoes you don't need anymore? Well, why don't you just get a car instead of worrying about your horse? Hey, solar isn't good and coal and oil isn't bad. What I found is that when you talk about coal and oil in a way that it's bad, people aren't able to hear it. I know where I was, locked in, global warming denier. It was just because I knew that the government wasn't the answer, because I was at a point of professional success where the government seemed like the bane of my existence. And so I knew that adding more government wasn't going to ever change things. It was just using force to solve problems. But I didn't know, I wasn't fully aware, because the love in my heart hadn't expanded to the point to think of something simple enough so that everybody who wanted to be a part of it could be a part of it. To energize and engage communities of humans who want to spread the word about solar, and then creating a simple to understand incentive for doing it. If we help one group with 1,000 members to learn about solar energy, we will write a check for $100,000 to that organization. If half the people switch, then we'll write another $250,000 check after we find the best prices for people and not bothering them with salespeople. The most ironic part about this is, after spending 10,000 hours in sales and leadership and sales development, is that I realized that people, all things being equal, they prefer to not talk to a salesperson. And so we created this service that got rid of salespeople, despite spending the first 20 years of my life learning how to develop really great salespeople. So that's the irony of the whole thing, is going from work is good to doing what you love is good and doesn't feel like work. That discipline is the price that we pay when we're not willing to deal with the childhood trauma that keeps us from believing that we deserve to do what we would love to do. It keeps us trapped into somebody else's game because of the conditional love we received from our parents that told us the rules we had to accept in order to be accepted sets us up for the next stage, which is your school or your boss. And then we're always looking around and looking up for somebody to do something instead of understanding that it's up to us and that we can do it. And it's people met, like you, Matt, people who are willing to invest your life to develop the skills to use current technology and the energy we have to spread the news about initiatives that are happening. I'm inspired by some of the things that you told me that you were working on. And I feel grateful to be living a path now where it's actually for people instead of being really good competitors. It's about creating a really beautiful world where I'm connecting with a whole lot of wonderful people. Like Justin Fairman, I met a few weeks ago. He created the Conscious Living magazine, if you know him.
Yeah, I just had him on the podcast like 2 or 3 episodes ago.
Wow, see, small world. I was hanging out with him through a guy that I met. There's a guy I'll introduce you to that I think you would love to have on. He just finished like a 41-day fast. And then he was going down to do an 11-day darkness meditation in Guatemala where they lock you in a dark room for 11 straight days. And so that's how I met Justin was through that dude. He's super rad. So after we get off, I'll tell you his name and you can check him out. You probably already know him. But
it's not Giovanni, is it?
Yeah, I think it's Giovanni. What's his last name?
Bartolomeo.
Let's see who it is.
He's in Canada, Collective Evolution.
Nope. He's got a really weird name and I forgot it, but I'm going to look for it while you're asking me the next question and tell you what it is.
Cool. Yeah, that's it. That's awesome. Okay, well, you said a lot of things there again, which I wanted to kind of like recap from where I'm standing. One of the things that I say is that in the new earth, in the new world, it has to be, there is no competition. There is only family. And so what you're talking about fundamentally is the end of the road of getting. Yeah. You can live that life as long as you want, but there is an end, and it ends in not the same fulfillment as what can I give and how can I serve? How can I help? In that fundamental character switch of your being and who you are, your whole life changes and you'll experience levels of fulfillment. I know some people who make $500,000 a month and they're not as happy as some people I know that just make nothing. And that's one of the fundamental differences. And we are being fed this lie, that you're like, we got to go and get and work 80 hours, and the discipline of you going to get it is like, that's like another mind F, you know what I mean? And again, fundamentally, as a human being, one of the things that I like to say about an enlightened being, and I'm not talking about enlightened Buddha going around on a cloud, I'm just talking maybe enlightened, just being light, to be lighter, to be love. You stop saying, what can I get? And you go to, what can I give? How can I give? That's it. How can I give? And, I had a coaching call today with an amazing human being and, Rachel, and she, I was like, these things, like, it's not easy. It doesn't make it easy, but in your heart that it's right. And that fulfills you. And I was like, I can't even tell you how challenging my human experience is right now. It's challenging. I'm doing the best I can, but I feel in my heart it's right. And if it ends up being wrong, which it totally could be, at least I know in my heart, like I move towards serving others, to helping build this new planet. And one of the big things on this new planet, we're here, I think that the star seeds, the conscious people, the new kids, or just say evolution, is towards building a new city. If you look at any part of the city and our function, our world, it's nonsense. It's just total nonsense when you break it all down, the monetary system. But what it comes back to is energy. We need food, water, shelter to live. And that all goes to energy. And they have all the power because they have hundreds of trillions of dollars. They control the government. They control, they control politics. They control all that kind of stuff. So we need to take the energy, and people need to have it for free, but they're going to hold on to that forever. So really,
who owns the sun?
What's that?
Who owns the sun?
Well, yeah. So the people that own it, though, like oil companies, like they're not going to just give that up. You know what I mean? We as a people can figure out a new way to live and to build communities, to build houses. And when you switch to serving, there's so many ways to serve. There's so many ways to help each other. But it's going to require you mostly letting go, as you had to, of all these things that you think that you need. So they're really fundamental and you can't build a skyscraper without a foundation, We can't build the new earth on wrong foundations. So energy needs to be sustainable. Our intentions, we can't fake that. You can say, oh yeah, I'm of service to other people, and fake it. That's fine, but you're faking it and you know it, and you have to make that switch internally to be like, okay, let's just take a second here. What's happening on this planet? Who am I? How can I give and support? And then you will go into and find people that are on that same wavelength. So ultimately it comes back to responsibility. I don't know if you want to touch on that, or I should ask you another question.
Whatever you want to do, man. I'm here to
Awesome. So, well, one of the things that I want to ask you, okay, we're talking about solar energy. Do you see any applications for a person who maybe owns a business, like from your journey, which is powerful? We haven't even touched on a lot of the wild experiences I know that you have, really checking out the human experience.
I'm going to plug this in. Continue to talk.
Yeah. So you've really had a human experience, very diverse, very interesting.
Yeah.
From your experiences, how would you help someone who's either has a business or has a life and a family, and they're like, okay, cool, I can get solar, I could do your solar thing, or maybe they want to find their own solar thing. What principles or recommendations would you give them as far as how they view the world and their life, and then how to maybe apply what you've done with Ovanova or through business experience or whatever to bring that concept into their business and life, to adopt these principles to make more of an impact in their community and for themselves and their families and all that kind of good stuff too?
I think that from the most basic application, where the advice is applicable in nearly every scenario, micro and macro, from a communication standpoint, being the change we wish to see in the world. If solar energy is something we receive, then the answer is learning to ask more open-ended questions. Because if somebody goes, something you like is, oh, vegans are annoying, they're judgmental, which, something to be said for the way a lot of vegans have come across for a long period of time. It's easy to say, well, we're not the ones out murdering animals and stuffing ourselves with cancer, but I grew up on a farm. One time, the guy my dad worked for couldn't afford to pay him, so he paid him in a cow that I wasn't allowed to name, and then we ate that cow for half a year. And I'm a dude that's eaten probably more Big Macs than most human beings alive in my unhealthy phase, trying to reconnect with the happiness from childhood when my mom would take me to McDonald's. Because what I was really missing was that joy to vivre, that part that I could never get enough to go back to. But the best thing I feel a vegan could do, to answer your question, is to say, well, how have you found vegans to be annoying? And just listen, so that we can then take the advice and learn ways of being that allow people to hear the message. We're fortunate to be on the side of, with a lot of the things people in these communities are doing, where they are legitimately useful things for humanity. Like, there are a lot of people who are working in these conscious communities who have a lot of really cool products, concepts, self-healing ideas, coaching, meditation, retreats. There's some really cool stuff that's going on. And I know for a fact that what broke my world open was listening to people that I had marginalized for a long period of time to drive an agenda that I wasn't even aware that I had, which was, how do I get more by getting people to get more? But it was such a beautiful thing we were hiding behind. It's education, and it's a program. And that was true. It was educational books, and it was this human development program. You want to develop human potential? Go knock on doors, 80 hours a week. You'll have some really interesting life experiences. But what I have learned is that, and I've gotten to the point now where I will almost never give advice unless I'm asked directly for it. I've given up the words get as much as I'm aware of, and I've given up the word should when I'm talking to someone. I don't tell people what they should do. I see my role is to help people become aware of what's available in the simplest possible way for them. So whether it's a business owner or a homeowner, the simplest way we could think of to help them learn what they could save using solar energy is find partners who already do a great job of that. And then, so they don't have to worry about who they're talking to or what kind of deal they're going to get. So we're kind of like Consumer Reports in a weird way. We're right in the middle. Like, there are a lot of people in the solar industry who want to work with us because of the number of people who come through our program or will be coming through our program. We're just turning the switch on. But there are already companies that want to work with us. And then I wouldn't want to introduce, to use a heteronormative pronoun and experience, I wouldn't want to introduce my sister to a jerk. And we see these supporters of these organizations as being like family members. Like you said, there's no competition. Like, we're in this together. So if I know that this dude over here has a reputation of being a jerk or not listening to the needs of the people that he dates and taking as much as he can and seeing what he can get away with, and the only thing that stops him are laws, like, like, it's kind of assuming that everybody's a rapist unless there's a law to stop them. And sadly, that's kind of been the case with the solar industry so far, as there have been a whole lot of people selling something that costs a good amount of money that have a lot of personal incentive to make the sale, or company incentive to make the sale, not the incentive to make sure the person receives the best value for them, not the incentive to make sure the person has the kind of experience that's going to leave them with a good impression of solar. So even if it's not the right time for them, for whatever reason, they think about a positive experience they had 3 years later. So what I would say is, when we recognize that it's our natural state to trust, it's our natural state to receive energy from above for free, that where can we give? And if you just want a simple business answer to what you asked, look at where customer acquisition costs in industries is high. Recognize that the reason that it's high is either because it's a shitty product that nobody wants, so it costs a lot to convince them to have it, or it's somebody or it's a really great product that's being promoted by people with divisive language, trying to get something for themselves, even if it's just the recognition of having created something so they can be cool in their conscious communities. Like, if it's about getting, you're contradicting yourself if it's something that actually adds value to the world. So how can you lower customer acquisition costs using technology to connect people with things which actually add value to the world? That's all Uber did. It asked people to trust people. Like, we used to never get in cars with strangers. Now it's asking people to trust people, and that lowers the cost of a ride. And because it's good for everybody, people tell their friends, and it doesn't cost much to convince somebody to use the service, especially in big cities and towns. Like, we understand that all disruptive opportunities come from loving people and trusting people and listening to people who have been marginalized, and not thinking you need to be their dysfunctional savior, but understanding that where you'll find system breaking ideas are in the margins, because in the margins are where the people exist that the system does not serve. You can keep making changes to the system to try to make it more fair. Like, you can try to make government more fair all day long, but you can't get away from the fact that at the end of the day, if you don't voluntarily pay into a system, there are people with guns who can come and point the guns at you and restrict your freedom and throw you in a place without a key. And that's true. Like, you're being forced, not consciously forced, to give money to an entity who believes that the only way to do good is to use force. And it's something that I fundamentally disagree with. I don't believe it's possible to solve a problem with the same level of consciousness that created it, like Einstein said. And I think the one thing that we've tried since the dawn of humanity is fighting each other to provide energy for ourselves, whether that's a handful of berries in the woods or using militaries to determine who gets the oil, militaries and banks. And so when I think of solar energy, I just think really simply, it's this thing that connects everybody. It is free. We know how to use it. We're just not very good at it yet. And when right now it's kind of like a really good CD, and it can be iTunes, but only if a lot of people buy CDs. And so we want to have a lot of people buy CDs, because when our energy becomes as easily and as readily accessible as our music is on iTunes, that's the end of the world as we know it. We don't think about how much time we work producing energy for ourselves. We don't think that's pretty much all we work for. You know, we don't see that that's why you can have millions and millions of more dollars and be less happy, is because once you have all the oil that you need to be able to connect with all the people that you want, then you're confronted with another challenge, which is, man, and now it's how do I liberate my friends? And okay, well, how many friends do I want to have? Do I only want this small group? And then you ultimately end up on these altruistic, either a path to very fast destruction, or a path where we begin to wake up and be like, there's got to be more to it than this. And what is more to it is being like a child again, you know, waking up, playing, creating. Here's a 3-word paradigm shift that happened for me that I found to be very useful. It was waking up and realizing that in the oil matrix world, the way life works, what people see as good, what the laws are put in place to protect, everything is built around a concept, which is humans are supposed to train, do, and get. We are trained what to believe in school. If we use our own original thoughts, we get a red mark for not parroting back what we're trained to believe. That's schools, college, job training. We train, and then we do the training, and then we get the results. So we train in school, we do some job, we get some money. You know, we train in a relationships course, and then we do some relationship things and get some relationship. What we're breaking free into now, and that world made a lot of sense in a world where everybody had to farm, where everybody had to do things in order to get food out of the ground to survive. But that mentality is a survival mentality. Train, do, get, don't think, go, don't question. Shut up, caveman, pushing your rock. Don't be an idiot. Get back to work mentality. What you're working on, and what a lot of the people in these communities are working on, is a different mindset, which is way easier now than it's ever been. And it's called create, share, receive. It's where you create the possibility of something, like having a podcast that can share beautiful ideas with the world. Then you create it, and then you create some content, you share it with the world. And it's very scary to do that, because you're taught not to create, to train and do somebody else's game, because it's safe, because you get money playing somebody else's game. So creating is scary, because we forget that we naturally know how to do it. We created clubhouses, shared the idea of the clubhouse with our friends, and then what did we receive? People to play in the clubhouse with. Or we received feedback that the clubhouse wasn't that cool, and we didn't make it mean anything about us. It just meant that we had some more work to do on our clubhouse before people wanted to come play in it. And so that takes persistence and courage. And that's the one area where, to really break free, to be willing to share what we've created with the world, and possibly receive an abundance for creating it, or possibly receive, that's a good concept, but there's stuff you need to work on still, which is part of what we did for the last 2 years with Ovanova. There's a beautiful way to live, but it involves more courage, because you might face rejection. It's easier to say I could have been a great artist than it is to actually do art, and to fail, and to get better, and to share it with people. You know, it's easier to say I could do this or I could do that than it is to do it. Like, you know, that's where a lot of misogyny comes from. Yeah, I could do this with this girl, but she's this or she's that. To not have to face the fear of, if I actually went up and talked to her, then she might reject me. And so when we train, do, and get, the only thing we could be rejected for is not following the rules, which are pretty easy to understand, because it's somebody else's game and they've already created the rules, like pay taxes and then use the military to control oil. Neat. I get that game. Not interested in playing it anymore. And so if you really want to bring about a new earth, it begins with believing that you're capable. We are capable still of our divine right of being able to create things, share them, not take it personally if it fails, to learn lessons and to continue to improve it, and then eventually receive the gift of living in a world where we're working together and creating abundance instead of working against each other to try to have access to a little bit more oil and technology. But it's applicable in any field. It's about loving people. As cliche as that might sound, it's like, how can I help you? And I know that if I can help a family save $20 a month, that's enough to go out to a meal with their kids. And that's where we are right now in solar. Yeah, long term, we're talking about a whole new thing. Like, one person had the internet, it's not that big of a deal. But when 1 billion people have the internet, it changes everything. Solar energy is the same way. When a few people are using it, it's kind of neat. When everybody is using it, then we alter a 200,000-year-old human habit, which is fighting each other over scarce energy. So right now, it's like, cool. I get to save you $20. You get to feel good about coming home and seeing your solar and knowing you're doing something good for the world. And even if you didn't buy anything, that's the neat part about our program. Even if you didn't buy anything, just for learning about solar energy, we give $100 to your Burning Man camp. You know, just for learning about solar energy, we give $100 to a school you care about, or a cause you care about, or a vegan cause you care about, or a sex slavery cause you care about, or a nonviolent communication course that you'd like more people to be able to take. We don't care. There's no should. It's just like, hey, this money is available to your family. And like, the way it works is that there's $125 every time we make a connection with somebody who owns a property. And they could be using solar energy. We give $100 to the organization who shared the link because they made it possible. They're the ones who added enough value to build a community. They're the ones who should benefit from the creation of this service. It's not a service to make money selling leads to the solar company. It's a free service to help spread the word about solar energy. $20 we give to the person who made the connection if it's a person. If the community comes to us, we keep that in order to do whatever we need to with, but usually we give it away. And then the $5 is what we keep to keep the lights on the back end. And if somebody does go solar, we receive $600 and we give 500 of that away. And it took a while to put the contracts together to make that money possible. We did it. And so we just want to give and give and give and give. And the cool thing about the way solar works is that they spend so much doing it other ways that if we can, like, when this ball really starts to roll, they're going to do it over and over and over again. And, you know, thus another meaning of our name, Ovanova. You know, Ova is, it's Ovanova. We like it because it's like the divine feminine. It sounds like I broke up. Okay. Anyway, I see your message.
Yeah, you broke up at the end there, man. Like, I think the last few sentences, the internet's getting a little bit crappy. Yeah. So why don't you, because all of that last part was very beautiful, and I love how you're setting up, you're basically needing to create a new paradigm with business, which is a challenge because money has to exist. Yeah, everything costs money, especially when now we're dealing with energy. So I see that you've created a new beautiful system, that the integrity is there, which is amazing. Do you want to just recap maybe the last paragraph of what you're talking about? It got to the end of where you know, when you give 100, when you share the technology, it's like $125 goes to like a charity or something like that. But what do you, so you can finish off the intention there, and then just, you know, something that you want to leave the listeners with and where they can find more information about what you're doing and about you as well.
Yeah, if you are a person who has a community of people who support a cause you care about, whether that is a Burning Man group, a school group, a Sunday school group, a fantasy football team, a crowdfunding effort that you're supporting, a baby shower, a wedding shower, basically anything, a nonprofit. If you have something that you would like to support, I'm trying to make this simple because it works two ways. If you are a supporter of an organization like that, then you can go to ovanova.co. And if like co, like yo, it's not .com. But anyway, ovanova.co. OVANOVA. Ova, like an unfertilized egg. Nova, new, or a star, like the sun. And also over and over and over, because we'll just do these campaigns over and over until the world finally goes solar. And you can nominate an organization that you care about, fill out a form that takes like 30 seconds, receive a phone call, send in the information necessary to find out how much you can save by using solar energy. No purchase required, no salespeople in your home, just an accurate quote which can't be produced without a little bit of interaction on your part to find out what your future energy needs are, which is why you still have to talk to somebody on the phone. And why any quote that just looks like an instant quote online, it's not a real quote. It's just designed to get you to call a solar company so they can send a salesperson to your house. What we're interested in is giving people real information and educating them on what they can save by using solar energy. When that happens, our company, our service gives $100 to the organization that you recommended. We then use our partnerships in the solar industry to find the lowest possible prices for you. We have people who bid against each other, and our partners are saving people almost $5,000 over the market average when they are choosing to go solar using this service, because we don't have salespeople to pay commissions to. We just have educators on the phone. And because of that, if you do adopt solar energy, if you do say, which, by the way, I keep saying saves you money, because if you live in one of the states where our service is available and you're not using solar energy, you're actually losing money by not switching. Like today, should you switch, we give another $500 to the organization that you recommended. So that's one way the service works. The second way the service works is you just go to the website and you sign up as a community, and then we will create a campaign page for you, which is a link, just a simple link. Like you could go, for instance, like ovanova.co/campaign/Standing Rock. And you'll see a campaign page that we have set up for the Standing Rock Indian tribe. We're waiting for another first degree of connection with the elders. We don't want to use their name for a campaign without their full support, but it's a good sample page of kind of what we create. ovanova.co/campaign/Standing Rock. And we can do that for any organization. That is the page that the organization can then send to its members. The organization could say, hey, we want you to look into solar energy. We're inviting you to take 10 minutes to learn what you can save using solar to raise $100 for us. We are inviting you to learn about solar energy to raise funds to fight cancer, to raise funds to end misogyny, to raise funds to end GMOs, to raise funds to end oil spills, to raise funds. We're inviting you to learn about solar. People do not have to buy solar to raise funds for their organization. They just have to be willing to learn. That's what we spent our entire life developing the skills, in the last few years developing the connections to make possible. And I know it sounds a little ridiculous and too good to be true, but it's here. And we already have a few organizations that are beginning to benefit, and some other people who are inviting us to get to know them better. And I don't want to name drop and say a bunch of things, but there's some really beautiful things that are going on. The third way you can be involved is if you like the idea of earning a living by giving, and the idea of signing organizations up to use a free service that will give them money to spread the word about solar. If that appeals to you, you can get in touch with us. We have people who do that, and then we share the revenue with you. That's where the $20 goes. So there's $100 for the person, or $100 for the organization. There's $20 for the person that created the connection with the organization, and there's $5 that goes to Ovanova. Like, we have to not starve to death, but beyond that, we just care about spreading the service. And the cool thing about technology is you can do a lot of work with relatively few people. So we don't need 1 million people to tell the world about solar. We just need 1 million people to be #activists and ask people who trust them to be willing to trust something that sounds too good to be true. Did I explain that well enough? I'm still working on it. It's still hard for me to believe it's true, so I use too many words. Basically, we just have billions of dollars to give away to people, to organizations, when people who support them are willing to learn about solar energy. It's a solar educational fundraising free service.
That's a good summary. That's a good summary. Yeah, because I looked at the website and I was really trying to piece it together. So, and I know you're in the build phase, but it's a really interesting model because there's different models from business that I'm aware of, but I do know that solar is important. I do know that getting off of oil is very important, and we can create new paradigms and new models to create this shift of energy and the shift in the world and the shift with ourselves. So. You're really interesting, Catman. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm very much looking forward to future conversations about, building new communities, Burning Man, charitable things, natural energies, because there's infinite ways to do this, to get involved, to, make a change in your community, make a change in your life, and to example. So thanks for making that full switch and really committing to serving other people.
Thank you for listening so well. I apologize for gobbling up the time. I just get so excited about what we're doing. I just want everybody to know that this bizarre thing is real. Like, oh my gosh, I can go to a link and money magically appears while we're learning about this awesome form of energy that could liberate humanity. It's hard to not get really excited about because I want to share it with the world. The fact that you're willing to take some time through the recommendation of one of our common friends to find time for me on your show means the world to me. And anybody that we can be of service to, we'll gladly be of service to. Is there anything that you could think of that I could do for you or your show as I hit the road to get on about the day?
We'll connect the internet. Talk again. So thank the listeners. And we'll see you.
Thank you, listeners.
See you guys.